I'm Julie Legg, author of The Missing Piece and diagnosed with ADHD at 52.
And I'm Jel Legg, diagnosed at 55.
Welcome to ADHD Difference. In this episode, we're going to be talking about ADHD and dating. Not so much relationships, it's a big subject and we'll have several episodes to cover different elements of it, but today it's all about dating. I thought we should start off with some of our ADHD traits and how they can impact some of our dating skills or our dating experience. So we've got the likes of impulsiveness, over-talking, overthinking, the fight or flight response that we'll often have, and also our search for dopamine along the way.
Yeah, and I think I'd like to start by saying I haven't done a great deal of dating, but I've only spent, a year or two of my entire life single. So it's not that I haven't had relationships pretty much back to back. It's just I've never really spent a lot of time on the dating scene. I had to really think about how many people I'd dated in that traditional sense. Impulsiveness, all those various things that come, the traits that Julie just mentioned. One of the things that's defined my dating is if I meet someone, I'm pretty much all in straight away. I know that's a bad thing. It's only a bad thing if the other person actually just finds that just too much. And there would have been dates, I guess I would have been on where it was pretty obvious straight away that I was a bit too much for them. But yeah, you hear of people all the time who are dating for weeks and then months, and they're just taking it slow. I've never taken it slow. It's not something I've ever done. I can't understand that concept. That doesn't mean there's anything wrong with that. It's probably the right way to do it. But looking back with a late adult sort of diagnosis of ADHD, I've reanalyzed and looked back at all the times I've dated or had relationships, whether they've been 3 months, 6 months, sometimes 10 years. But there was never any question of going slow with them.
No, and our relationship, for example, and again, we'll talk in detail about that in other episodes, but we didn't date either.
No. We knew each other 30 years ago in a band. And we knew each other for 2 or 3 years and we didn't date. There was no romance or relationship whatsoever other than we were friends in a band. And then when we got together 12 years ago, it just dived straight in, really.
Yeah.
It was very quick.
Yep.
There was no dating or seeing if it was right. We just knew it was right. And to be fair, with past relationships that may have lasted for many years, we knew they were right when we went into them, and they were right. They were not disasters from day one. Relationships can fall apart years later. It's very common. So it doesn't, we don't carry any battle scars that we really got that one wrong. Every relationship brought something to the table that we're glad we had them. We don't regret a single relationship.
Yeah.
Fair to say, do you think?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think too, when we talk about our ADHD traits, things like impulsiveness, I think it goes both ways. I would be more impulsive on a date to go, hey, let's do this, or and I was seeking that from them as well. So many dates that I've had, in hindsight, they probably would have been ADHD as well. Although I'm not trying to diagnose anyone, but they had that element of impulsivity and spontaneousness that I loved. That was great. Those that didn't kind of have those traits that matched mine, my dopamine levels just didn't quite get there at all. And I could become quite bored quite easily with my dates. That was a struggle.
And from my understanding too is that, and I think my experience and the experiences you've shared with me is some of those dates where you stopped the dating after 3 or 4 dates, often the feedback would be, I don't understand. We're really having lots of fun. We're getting on just great. So from their perspective, we just seem very strange people to date because we could stop that quite quickly. And I really feel sorry for them. They just don't understand why we stopped.
No,
and tracks.
And neither did we at the time. And I think this is, so it was a bit unexplained for us as well. Impulsiveness on a date or at random dates with random people, potentially doing random things, but also over talking. You've had an experience.
Yes, I can remember probably the first time I went on a date. Yeah, there was someone I really, really wanted to go on a date with, and somehow I pulled it off. I don't know how now. And we just went for a drink, and I talked my way through a couple of hours, and I must have completely bored them silly. I thought I had quite an exciting world at the time, being in a band. I thought it would just be a shoe-in. There's lots come along to rehearsal, a gig, whatever. It's such fun. But I didn't stop to listen to them and really look into who they were. And so that ended after one date quite quickly. Yeah, and so that makes a lot of sense to me now why. A couple of points I want to make very quickly. One is that we've never knowingly dated or had a relationship with someone who was diagnosed with ADHD, apart from each other, no one else. Two, there is no way we're suggesting anyone we've ever dated or been with has ADHD. And in that regard, where we may have very quickly fallen into a relationship with someone, they may have displayed characteristics of ADHD, but doesn't mean they have it at all or had it. It just doesn't mean that at all. There's no implication. It may be that they were just intoxicated by the energy that we can bring to a party or space.
Absolutely. Energy is huge. You don't have to be bouncing off the walls to have energy. You can see it in expression and just how you deliver a sentence and, sparkling eyes and,
just the passion.
Yeah. And that can be quite intoxicating for some people, and they may feel their feelings towards someone with ADHD might be even stronger because we're displaying that. And when you think about normal dating, who would know? But often it's it's a slow pace. There might be some sort of standardization around dating and where you go and what you do and what you talk about potentially on a first date. But with no filter and no regulation. I know you haven't done a lot of dating per se with that regards, but I just ask whatever questions I had in my mind, and some were quite blunt questions, and some people were quite shocked, and others were delighted that I had, rather than skim over the top and sort of have a nice date, I got down to the nitty gritty. Fight or flight's also, I know that I've exercised that in dating as well. As you said, after a couple of dates or even after one date, just go, no. And also, but we laughed so much. And I go, yeah. Probably because I was entertaining them, certainly not the other way around. And if I were to go back from a date and I wasn't enthused and more energized, it would be the opposite. I'd feel very drained, and I knew that feeling meant that the date probably wasn't going well, or not to repeat it, because what they other person were like on paper, it doesn't mean a thing. It's what they're like in person that matters.
Yeah. So with ADHD, we're not talking about one attribute. So for example, passion and diving in with passion and intent and putting your best foot forward, that does not automatically qualify anyone as having ADHD. It's a whole range of different things that impact your life. In a negative way, they're a collection of descriptors. So it is possible that we've met our match in people on the dating or relationship scene who dive in with a lot of passion and meet ours, and therefore we can fall into a relationship quite quickly. However, the other aspects that we have on our character that comes from having ADHD are the things that then would trip that relationship up or break it.
Right. So, for example, an unexpected big emotions, when they thought that they had a sussed, potentially could shock them or confuse them. Over time, when we're allowed to be ourselves and we drop the mask, often our real selves can be a bit of surprise for those that we're trying to impress. Yeah.
So from my perspective, some of the dates I've walked away from after one or two dates, I think generally the pattern was, as you mentioned, boredom. I could look at someone and think, you are really nice. I really like you. This is quite an easy date. I can sense you really liking me, and this is just a natural space we can go into. But then something about them would reveal quite quickly that I'm dealing with someone that wants to get married in a couple of years, get a 2-bedroom house and have a couple of kids. Nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that. But for me, from an ADHD perspective, that's never been my goal or life plan. I've ended up in that situation and very happy with it. But it was not something that was driving me. So we're talking early 20s here. It was not on my horizon in any form. I don't honestly know what was on my horizon in the early 20s, apart from, lots of musical aspirations or wanting to see a bit of the world or and it wasn't going from one frivolous date to the next. I was never one of those guys that was a player. I did have genuine relationships, even from my first one, real proper girlfriend. Proper girlfriend. There's a couple of dates. And then at 19, I fell into a relationship that lasted 5 years. It was very grown up and very mature. And it was fantastic. And so they're very formative, important years, 19 to about 23, 24. That's when generally people get to, can I say, play the field and have a lot of fun. But I was quite happily in a sort of routine relationship with someone, and it was just brilliant. And I was always loyal, and that was how it worked. So in a way, that sounds, to a lot of you listening, that sounds quite mundane and domestic and boring. It wasn't. It was really good. But if I sensed there was an entrapment in a relationship, a sense that we were heading down a predetermined path quite quickly in dating, back to dating, I would be out of there very quickly. Whereas the one I've just described to you, 5 years, had no expectations or sense of where it was going.
I was quite a prolific dater, and I loved it. The first date was either the worst or the best date. I loved it. I loved learning about people, new energy, new faces. I wanted to find my person. And so I kept trying until I did. And I have had several long relationships. But I really enjoyed the dating process. I had quite a strict parameters because I wanted someone to match my energy. So already they were quite kind of strict. Those that got through, yay. Those that didn't, goodbye. However, where I failed, I guess, is after my first marriage and as a single mother dating, there was only certain times that I could exercise the dating ritual, and I expanded my list. I thought I should be more open-minded because, I was getting older. I was in my 30s and the rest. And that really failed me because I opened my list up too much. And I had some weird and wonderful people, lots of situations where I felt actually quite awkward and uncomfortable. And I wish I stuck to my guns, but I did in the end. But it's kind of that learning curve without being too strict on who you want to date and be open-minded, but also have know your limits with regards to character traits or things that aren't good for you in your life. But we're talking about ADHD traits, but let's talk about finding a date, because there'll be those listening who are single at the moment, and how on earth do you find a date at your age, whatever age that may be?
Well, I can tell you how you don't find a date, or how I've never found a date. So I'm a 60 child, which means 70s was having a big impact on me, 70s and then early 80s when I'm sort of, in theory, meant to start dating. So unfortunately, that culture of the 70s is ingrained into that young teenager, preparing mentally to go into the world of dating. And it was a dreadful culture. It was dreadful. It was always based around this thing called a chat-up line. The idea that, all the boys that were getting the girls, they had the charm. They knew how to walk into a situation and say just the right line to nail a date, which is the most misogynistic rubbish I've ever heard. It's just, even when I was young, I knew that there was just fake rubbish. It was just not how life would work, surely. So I've never actually got a date by walking up to someone in a bar or some random person and offering to buy them a drink. That's Hollywood cliche. That's rubbish. How it worked for me was always just there was someone in the social circle that I would just make some time to have a conversation with. Generally, bringing in humour. Humour always works, just because it's a fun conversation, and that brings out the best in people. And then maybe you get a chance to ask them to go bowling or do something, and it goes from there. So my dates were always driven from either a social circle or someone I worked with, or I have had the experience of building up a relationship online, actually, but it was with someone who was real. It wasn't, and I would not advocate doing it with a stranger. I've seen people do it with people who they just have never met and they don't know if they're real or not. But this was with a real person that I knew existed, and knew the same people as I knew, so it was very safe. And so there are all sorts of different ways of doing it, but it's I think organic's the word. I think organic. Something just sparks and kicks off. You've got to have your wits about you. You've got to have your radar on, looking for that opportunity. You've got to take that spark from someone, read it just right, and just take it to the next spark and see if there's something a little more without being too pushy. Once the door opens and the opportunity to have a date, well, from the ADHD viewpoint, then it's bam, straight in. And now that can actually be wonderful. Now, there's some expression about that where you sort of get, some people, it's a bad thing where you get love bombed and then suddenly ghosted and dropped. I was never someone that love bombed someone. I literally dived in and let's get to know each other. Let's have some fun. Let's have some energy here. And that can lead to relationships lasting years. Or, you know, that dating comes to an end, there's always a reason for it, but it's not the bad side of what you read about.
Two things that come to mind from that. Being pushy. I think if they should have texted me today, they should have asked me out on another date, they should have said this, they should have done that. If, in my feelings, if you're thinking along those lines, you know what? They're not the right match. Right. Yeah. Dating should be easy and it should be fun. And also, you should be yourself. It's easy to mask because you want to impress someone. Probably the best policy is to be open. And it's not necessarily to say, hey, I've got ADHD. You don't have to do that. But you can just be your charming, vivacious, lovely self. Over-talk, just be yourself. And they either will like you for that or they won't. And the best thing is, at least you're being authentically you. I think, when you try to hide too much of yourself, just like in a friendship point of view, that's probably not going to work out long term.
Yeah, that's true. You do need to be yourself. And, is it love bombing when you just dive in too much, a little bit too fast off the blocks? But there's been fast off the blocks with passion and interest, and the dopamine that is getting the dopamine's rising. You're getting the hits. There's a difference between that and being too fast off the blocks and saying, "Well, I want children by next February," and I want to be married by 21. It's whoa, because you see, there's such a difference between passion and planning. That planning is where it just goes, whoa, I'm out of here, because life doesn't work like that, and no one wants to suddenly have all those plans thrown at them, surely.
Unless magically there are two people dating that want exactly the same thing,
fantastic.
and then go for it.
I've seen that happen, and that's brilliant, because of course, we have observed around us over the last 30 years or so far more relationships that aren't based on ADHD than are based on ADHD. Our only experience ourselves is
that we know of,
is through our own experiences, because we have ADHD.
Finding dates. I went online a lot, and that was a heck of a lot of fun, and I'd line them up. I'd line up the dates.
Drinks.
I would
shots.
I would have pretty much, 3 dates on a Saturday. I'd have a breakfast date and a lunch date and a dinner date, and depending on how well things go, occasionally I'd cancel a dinner date because I
Well, they went well because you probably didn't pay for any of those meals.
Well, exactly. But, I mean, that's pretty, I was pretty focused on getting out there and making the most of my time. As I said, a single mother, so I didn't have a lot of time to exercise my dating regime, but I got there in the end. But ending a date, so we were not talking about ending a relationship per se, but after 1, 2 or 3 dates, say, that don't go well, I use my intuition, my gut instinct, absolutely. And if I felt that there was any red flags, I was quite tough. And I'd just say, no, I don't think it's going to work out. And that may have seemed a bit cruel, because others were just going, hey, well, if you want us to have more fun on a date, hey, I can go and take you to the comedy club. And it's kind of like, I don't mean that, because I know we can go to an event and have fun, but it should, for me, I just wanted something naturally that could bounce along and the mundane to be fun. You know what I mean? I didn't have to be spent money on to go to an event for that.
I agree entirely. I don't think Jules definitely has a lot more dating experience than I have, but I don't think what you do on the date has anything to do with whether it's a successful date or not. You could literally walk in the park for a couple of hours, or the beginning, I guess, of the relationship we have, you could describe a period of dating, but if it were in any sense dating, it was simply sitting, talking at each other, with each other, with each other, and suddenly noticing the sun has gone down. And it might be just across the kitchen dining table, and the sun's gone down, and it was up, and it was bright and sunny when we started. Now it's pitch black. And where did the time go? You get lost. It doesn't require, in my opinion, going to the movies or a dinner. No. In fact, we still don't have any sense of that romance in our relationship. That there has to be flowers and a particular occasion. It's all meaningless. It's about communication. Dating for me, where it happens, all about, are we communicating? Are we really mentally getting on? The rest will fall into place. And
also being honest.
Yes.
Because, that's testing a relationship quite early on in the process. But wouldn't you rather know right up front whether your honesty is going to be well received, or whether it opens up a great discussion or celebrated, or whatever the honesty involves, rather than wait and feel I shouldn't really bring that up and then drag it out until you're into a relationship, and then that's maybe a little bit more difficult. Ending dates, yes, can seem cruel, but let's talk about bouncing back.
Oh, yes. I've always bounced back quickly. Yeah. There's lots of different experiences and methods of doing it. I can remember one relationship ending, which was not my choice, and it's like, okay, so out came an Oasis album, and I can't remember the name of the song now, but it's a very long one, Live Forever or something, and I played it about 50 times in a row. My flatmates absolutely had enough of it, but by the time I played it to a certain point, I thought, well, that's that process and dealt with it. I just got lost in that song. It was a cathartic way of just letting that sadness out. So I'd always bounce back. And I remember one occasion losing another, it was more than dating. It had been a relationship for about 18 years. And I just bounced back. And one of my friends at the time...
18 years?
18 months, sorry, yes. 18 months. A guy was in a band at the time. He'd stayed over this weekend. We'd had a few drinks, and he said, I can't believe how well you seem to be taking this. And I thought, am I not taking this badly enough to show that this meant something to me, this relationship? And I thought, no, because I can't stop it. I didn't make the call on this, so I need to bounce back. So whether it was dating a few times and thinking, I think the worst part about dating someone for a few times is generally they're in the social circle. It's like, how am I going to now cope with this moving forward in that social crowd? Yes. Because we sort of dated, we haven't explicitly either said, you're not really that nice, or I don't think I really want to be with you. So it's not about character assassination, but it's about, wow, we've got to actually just move forward. But I always found it very easy to bounce back from any kind of negative side of things, because there's just always so many other things in life to do. And of course, to get the dopamine hit of feeling happy again, you literally have to get back into the scene.
Yes. Now, there is ending a date, which could be a few times, and there's ending a relationship.
Yeah, I know.
And they are slightly different, because in a relationship, you've put a lot of investment over time. Right. And that isn't always a bounce back. There could be a lot of time ruminating about what went wrong and what could have been and things like that. But so on a date level, definitely pick yourself up, brush yourself off, and onto the next date. That's what I found.
Yeah, and I think you would have more experience than me of that, because where dates for me have ended, it's probably just fizzled out. We've just not arranged another date. There's nothing particularly been said. Yeah. And I didn't see a need to say anything if it's just fizzled out. Yes.
Now, I've also had dates that haven't worked, but they've remained good acquaintances in a way, and it's actually nice to have to have, I call them friends, but we've already gone through that, close acquaintances. It's really nice, occasionally to go out to the pictures and feeling that, oh my God, this isn't this isn't them trying to redate me. It's not. It's very platonic, but sometimes getting that out of the way and realising that they're not a perfect match. Just, it's really nice to have company from time to time as well.
I do think a lot of you, the question will always come down to, and I'm sure people listening, is, people say, I can't imagine getting myself into a relationship. It seems so hard. Or I'm picking the wrong people and not having success. As Julie said several times, it's about honesty with yourself first and honesty with them. You have to be honest with yourself and own your feelings and your view and the way you see the world. And if you know you have ADHD, obviously you have to own it. With dating, you just can't give up. You've got to find this balance between not being obsessed and constantly driving it as the only thing in life, but at the same time not giving up and thinking, well, there's no one out there for me, because there literally is someone out there for you. And the only advice I can give is always look around you. Look around. There's an old saying which I really, I love these old sayings that come from our parents' generation, because they stretch back a long way. But the odds are you already know the person you're likely to end up marrying. And that saying, I heard that when I was young, and I was always looking around thinking, is it you? Is it you? But there is a truth in that. There is a truth in that, and I can testify to that, and lots of people I know can testify to that.
Yes. Now, you also use the word marriage, but then
no, marriage is the end result of dating generally for a lot of people.
Yeah, but it doesn't have to be marriage.
No.
Long-term relationship, but whatever. Yeah.
But the expression is the intent that, because you start dating in theory, and then you eventually end up something more serious.
I agree. Also, too, I think for those people that have been single for a long time going, I can't face the world of dating, wouldn't know where to start, don't know how. I think if you don't look at it from a romantic thing, but think about dating as a social thing, and just go out to have a bit of a laugh, to have some company with someone, lower the expectations not of the character you're meeting, because you absolutely own who you choose to be around, but what might happen after that date. So don't line it all up saying, right, great, and then we'll be engaged by Christmas and, whatever it may be. But I think just having an open mind as to what will come after that first date, and just go in there and fill your boots with dopamine, enjoy being out, enjoy if you're going out, enjoy different scenery, different places, having good banter with someone. And in my view, I think, again, dating should be easy if it's the right person. If it's awkward and whatever, well, they're not the right person, and that's when you sort of next one.
And it shouldn't come with all the entrappings. That's not the right word, is it? All the commercial sense of flowers, chocolates, dinner, and all these expensive things. That's all going to do something, in my opinion, going to do something that involves a lot of noise and inability to talk to each other. Dating's about talking to each other and just getting to know each other and seeing if there's a match there. It's also, now, at the beginning we said that we don't take things slowly, whether it's dating or the next stage after dating. We don't. But some people with ADHD may take things slowly because there's a reservation, and that's okay too. Just because we don't doesn't mean other people can't.
And there's a risk, of course, by jumping in there and being impulsive and all in. There's a risk that you invest a lot of time and money and, you know, whether it's moving in together or whatever, without actually really ensuring that the gel, you know, that you gel and through some good times and some rougher times and really know each other well. So, yes, I can see definitely more reserved people, more gingerly approaching that. But I guess this is more about that's entering a relationship. And I think at the dating stage is the first step, right? Getting out there and meeting people and chatting and, yeah.
Oh, because dating's like a job interview, isn't it?
Well,
it's like a
fun.
job. It's like a string of job interviews for a relationship rather than a job. I mean, there is such a fine line between dating and a relationship, because third date in, you are actually in theory, in a relationship.
Ish.
Yes, you are. In theory, it's a very small one, or it might be about to flip into a lifetime one. It's such a thin line. And none of us, to be honest, whether we have ADHD or not, are experts on it. None of us can be in your shoes when you're doing it. If you're very aware of your traits and how they may be perceived and received by someone without ADHD, at the same time, just keep hold of that knowledge, because you may find yourself dating someone who is undiagnosed ADHD or has ADHD but doesn't want to tell you just yet for fear that you're going to run a mile. So keeping that one on board.
Yeah, and also too, just because your date does not have ADHD or that you sense that they do not have ADHD, it doesn't mean that it's not going to be a good match. What you're looking from them is some active listening on their part and encouraging you to talk more or finding interest in your interest. You know what I mean? At the end of the day, it's all about understanding and great open conversation. And you can have that with anyone, neurotypical or neurodiverse, but picking up on the listening and that communication from the start, I think, is a good one.
And I'm going to mention it, your book, because one of the things from my perspective, because I didn't write the book, is one of the things I love about the book, having read it, is that it's really awesome for people who are dating or heading into a relationship or related to a woman with ADHD. I was going to say someone, it's primarily women. So that's, and I had a conversation with someone recently around the book space, asking about relationships. And all I could say to this lovely person was, look, you know, this book really is for your prospective partner to get some idea of how you think, or there's just as much chance you could meet someone with ADHD. And my advice, which was with a smile, not literal, not you must follow this, if you can find yourself someone with ADHD that you're drawn to, that's probably going to give you some good odds that it's going to be a shared journey. At least you're going to start understanding each other.
Yes. And in fact, I think the lady in particular, talking at our author's talk just this weekend, and a lady had brought in my book, for me to sign on the day, which is wonderful. And she had highlighted, there were sentences and paragraphs were highlighted and underlined. And she said, I'm not diagnosed with ADHD yet, but I tell you what, my next partner needs to read these things.
Yes.
And I thought that was so wonderful, because if you can resonate with some of the points and own it, and then explain to other people that it's not just me, there's a whole bunch of us feel this way, or a whole bunch of us will have these experiences or show these behaviours based on how our brains work.
So it doesn't mean you have to find someone with ADHD today. It doesn't mean that at all. But at the same time, it's not to be excluded from the general approach, because person A meets person B. Person A is determined to spend the next 20 years traveling the world and never settling down. Person B wants to settle down. You've got very little in common. Having something in common does form the basis of a relationship and starts with the dating. I'm just saying, if you both have ADHD and you're both aware of it, just be aware that might stretch your odds up just to have a more successful chance at that.
And we're talking diagnosed ADHD, because I think to undiagnosed ADHDers, while they might get on really well, again, they might not understand with regards to emotional dysregulation, for example, if that would happen, or quick temper. But once ADHD is understood and both parties can own that, I think a greater understanding can come from that.
And to be fair, we've also, at some of these events, we have had people come up to us who have bought the book specifically because their very significant other has ADHD and they're struggling in that relationship and trying to find their way through that. And to be fair, I think we can identify people, particularly on your side of things, who you've dated, who didn't have ADHD.
No.
And it was stop right there.
Yeah.
No, that's even before you've got into the real negative stuff that comes ADHD. That was just at the first hurdle of the passion, the energy, the talking. Over talking.
Yeah.
So there's no black and white rule to this. There's no fixed. We can't give you the magic bullet, but stuff to think about when it comes to dating, eh?
Absolutely.
I think so.
And that was ADHD and dating. Thanks for listening.